The fluorescent lights of the women's locker room hummed a flat, indifferent note, casting a sterile green-white glare on the rows of metal lockers. The air was thick with the scent of salt, damp neoprene, and the faint, metallic tang of effort. Anya Sharma sat on the narrow bench, methodically lacing her standard-issue work boots. She moved with an economy of motion that was almost invisible, each tug and loop precise, a small, ingrained ritual of preparation. "Hey, look! It's the den mother!" A voice sneered from the other end of the bench. It belonged to a young BUD/S candidate, Miller, his face still round with youth but hardened by the first brutal weeks of training. He and two others, their chests puffed with the temporary invincibility of the young and the tested, had cornered the small space. "Making sure all the paperwork is filed, Sharma?" Another one, Graves, chimed in, slamming his locker shut with unnecessary force. The sound echoed off the tiled walls. "Wouldn't want the seals to run out of paper clips." Anya finished her right boot, the knot perfectly square. She didn't look up. Her focus was on the task at hand, a habit drilled into her over a lifetime of more consequential preparations. Her presence in this locker room was a simple matter of logistics. The main base facilities were undergoing renovation, and this auxiliary building, attached to the logistics depot she managed, was the temporary overflow. It meant she, a civilian contractor in her late 40s, shared a changing space with the raw material of naval special warfare. "Leave her alone," a third candidate mumbled, already turning away, but Miller wasn't finished. He stepped closer, blocking the path to the door. "I'm just asking a question. What's someone like you even doing here? This is a place for warriors, not clerks." He used the word clerk, as if it were a contagion. Anya finally looked up. Her eyes were a calm, steady gray, and they held his for a moment without heat or fear. There was nothing in her gaze but a quiet assessment. She saw the bravado, the desperate need for dominance that BUD/S cultivated and then refined. She saw the insecurity churning beneath it. She had seen it 1,000 times before. She stood, her 5'6" frame unassuming in her simple khaki work pants and navy polo shirt, the base contractor logo embroidered on the chest. She picked up her small, worn rucksack. "You have an evolution in 10 minutes, Candidate Miller," she said, her voice even and low. "Your boat crew is waiting. Don't be the reason they do push-ups until sunrise." She made a move to step around him. He shifted, a subtle, reflexive motion to block her again. It was a test of will, a playground dominance game played by men whose bodies were being forged into weapons. Anya stopped. She didn't sigh, she didn't roll her eyes. She simply waited, her stillness a stark contrast to their restless energy. The hum of the lights seemed to grow louder in the silence. Graves shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable. "Come on, Miller. Let's go." Miller held his ground for another second, his jaw tight, before giving a short, derisive laugh and stepping aside. "Whatever. Don't be late filing those supply requests." Anya walked past them without a word, her footsteps soft and even on the concrete floor. She didn't look back. As the door swung shut behind her, she heard their laughter, brittle and loud, an announcement of a victory they hadn't actually won. She walked down the hallway, the fluorescent hum following her, her expression unchanged. It was just noise, and she was very, very good at tuning out noise. Her office was a small, windowless cube buried in the heart of the logistics depot. Metal shelves crammed with binders and parts manuals lined 2 walls. Her desk was an old government-issue steel behemoth, its surface clear except for a monitor, a keyboard, and a single, perfectly aligned stack of maintenance requisitions. This was her domain. From here, she controlled the lifeblood of the training center. The boats, the engines, the weapons, the medical kits, the parachutes. Every piece of equipment that the instructors and candidates used passed through her system, its history and condition tracked in the meticulous spreadsheets she maintained. She sat down, the worn office chair groaning in protest. The screen glowed to life, displaying a cascade of data. She began her morning ritual, cross-referencing outgoing gear manifests with incoming service reports. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with a quiet, fluid efficiency. She wasn't just tracking inventory. She was reading the story the machines told. An unusual spike in fuel consumption in one of the rigid hull inflatable boats, ribs. A recurring comms failure in a specific set of radios. A batch of climbing ropes showing premature wear. These were the details others missed, the quiet whispers of impending failure. The door to her office swung open, and Lieutenant Commander Trent Caldwell strode in. He was young for his rank, with a sharp jawline and the aggressive confidence of a man who believed his own press. He was the officer in charge of the current phase of training, and he ran it with a relentless focus on metrics and attrition rates. "Sharma," he said, not as a greeting but as a summons. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his posture radiating impatience. "I need the readiness report for Hell Week. The Admiral is breathing down my neck for an update." "It's on your desk, sir," Anya replied, not taking her eyes off the screen. "I sent it over at 0600, same as every morning." She pointed a single finger at a line of data. "I flagged RHIB-4 again. The port engine is running 10% above standard RPMs at cruising speed. The fuel consumption logs confirm it. It needs a full diagnostic before it goes out." Caldwell waved a dismissive hand. "Senior Chief Vance's instructors already looked at it. They say it's fine. We're pushing the candidates hard. Everything is running hot. It's expected." "It's an anomaly, sir," Anya said, her tone still level. "Anomalies precede catastrophic failure. The maintenance protocol for that engine model specifically warns against sustained high RPM operation if a fuel-to-air mix is off. It's a boat engine, not a Faberge egg," Caldwell snapped. "We need every operational boat for this evolution. We're not sidelining one because of your spreadsheet paranoia. Just mark it green and move on." Anya finally turned to look at him. Her gaze was as steady as it had been in the locker room. "I will not mark it green, sir. I will mark it as amber with a recommendation for immediate service, as I have for the past 3 days. My report will accurately reflect the data. What you do with that information is your command decision." Caldwell's eyes narrowed. He was used to subordinates who were either intimidated by his rank or eager to please it. This quiet, unmovable civilian was a frustrating anomaly of her own. "You know, Sharma, there are a dozen other contractors who would kill for this job. People who understand the mission, who understand that sometimes you have to accept a little risk to forge warriors." "I understand risk very well, sir," she said softly. "That's why I track engine RPMs." Before Caldwell could retort, a shadow filled the doorway behind him. Senior Chief Elias Vance, the lead instructor for the boat crews, stood there, his presence as solid and unassuming as an anchor. He was a mountain of a man, with a weathered face and hands like worn leather, but his eyes were kind and sharp. He held 2 mugs of coffee. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble. He handed one of the mugs to Anya, ignoring his superior officer for a moment. "Figured you could use this," he glanced at Caldwell. "Sir, we having a problem?" Caldwell straightened up, his tone shifting slightly in the presence of the respected senior chief. "Just discussing operational readiness. Sharma here seems to think RHIB-4 is about to explode." Vance took a slow sip from his mug. "She's not wrong to be cautious. That boat's been a bit squirrely since we got it. I told the guys to keep an eye on it." He looked at Anya, a silent conversation passing between them. He trusted her data more than he trusted Caldwell's ambition. "But the LC is right, we need the hull in the water. We'll run it, but we'll keep it as the safety boat, close to the command vessel." It was a compromise, a small concession to the data. Caldwell, seeing a way to save face, nodded sharply. "Fine. Make it happen, Senior Chief." He gave Anya one last sharp look and strode away, his boots echoing down the hall. Vance watched him go, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He turned back to Anya. "Don't mind him. He's got stars in his eyes. Thinks the only way to get promoted is to break every record, including the one for most candidates dropped from the program. He's going to get someone killed," Anya said, her voice devoid of emotion. It was a statement of fact. a conclusion drawn from the data she observed every day. Equipment pushed past its limits, trainees running on fumes, safety protocols treated as suggestions. "I know," Vance said heavily. "That's why I'm here. And you," he tapped the rim of her mug with his own. "You keep flagging the problems. I'll keep trying to mitigate them. Somewhere in the middle, maybe we keep these kids alive." He gave her a small, tight smile and left. Anya turned back to her screen. She opened a new file, titling it Hell Week Evolution. Real-time monitoring. She began linking data streams. Weather service updates from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, GPS trackers for each RHIB, comms channel logs, and the individual biometric data feeds from the monitors each candidate wore. She was building a complete picture of the coming operation, a web of information that only she knew how to read in its entirety. She couldn't stop Caldwell from accepting the risk, but she could, and would, be prepared to calculate its consequences. The pressure mounted over the next 48 hours. Hell Week descended upon the base like a physical entity, a creature of sleep deprivation and constant, grinding motion. The air crackled with shouted orders and the groans of exhausted men. Anya worked with a tireless, focused intensity, her office becoming the quiet, humming brain of the logistical operation. She coordinated meal deliveries, ammunition resupplies, and medical standbys with the precision of a watchmaker. She slept on a cot in a storage room, waking every 2 hours to check system statuses and monitor the flow of information. Caldwell's plan was ambitious, a non-stop, 72-hour series of evolutions designed to shatter the candidate's limits. He was everywhere, a whirlwind of manic energy, his voice raw from shouting encouragement that sounded more like threats. The instructors, led by Vance, did their best to manage the chaos, their professional calm a stark contrast to Caldwell's bluster. But they were tired, too. Anya saw the signs in her data. The biometric feeds showed core body temperatures dropping to dangerous levels. Heart rates were erratic. The candidates were moving slower, their responses to orders delayed by fractions of a second that could mean the difference between life and death. She logged it all, sending summary reports to Caldwell and Vance every hour. Caldwell ignored them. Vance read them, his face growing grimmer with each update. On the third night, the crisis arrived. The evolution was a long-haul transit in the ribs, a 20-mile open ocean journey through a notorious stretch of water known as the washing machine. A storm front, predicted to stay well offshore, had suddenly changed course and was bearing down on them. Anya saw it first, a deep purple bloom on the weather radar that wasn't there an hour ago. She immediately sent a priority alert to the command vessel where Caldwell was overseeing the operation. Storm front accelerating. Recommend immediate return to base. Sea state escalating to condition 4 foot. The reply was almost instantaneous, a terse text from Caldwell himself. They are SEAL candidates, not cruise ship passengers. Mission continues. Anya stood up from her desk and walked to the small comm station she had set up in the corner of her office. She put on a headset, tuning it to the primary command channel. The airwaves were a mess of static and wind noise, punctuated by the roar of boat engines. "Repeat, what is your status, Boat 3? Over," it was Vance's voice, tight with concern. "Taking on water, port side tube is losing pressure. Over." The voice was young, panicked. Anya's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up the GPS data. She saw the 6 boats of the Evolution, spread out over a mile of dark, churning ocean. Boat 3's icon was flashing red. Then another icon, Boat 5, began to flash. Caldwell's voice cut through the static, high-pitched and frantic. "All boats, form up. Form up on the command vessel. Where is Boat 3? Someone get me eyes on Boat 3. His orders were adding to the confusion, not reducing it. The boats were too far apart, the sea too rough to maneuver effectively. On her screen, Anya watched the icons scatter like water bugs in a hurricane. This was no longer a training evolution. It was a mass casualty event waiting to happen. She took a deep breath, the air in her small office suddenly feeling cold and thin. She looked at the data streams, at the chaos on the water, at the failing leadership. and she made a decision. She stood up, grabbed the small rucksack she always kept by her desk, and walked out of her office, her footsteps quick and purposeful. It was time to stop logging the data and start changing the outcome. The Tactical Operations Center was a storm of controlled panic. Enlisted technicians and young officers scrambled between monitors, their faces illuminated by the frantic glow of radar screens and status boards. In the center of the room, LCDR Caldwell stood stiffly, gripping the back of a chair, his face pale. He was shouting orders into a radio, but his commands were reactive, chasing the disaster rather than getting ahead of it. The instructors who weren't on the water were clustered together, their expressions a mixture of frustration and dread, waiting for instructions that made sense. Anya walked into the room. No one noticed her at first. She was just the logistics clerk, a piece of the background scenery. She moved past the frantic officers to the main communications console, which was being manned by a young, overwhelmed petty officer. "Give me the headset," Anya said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. The petty officer looked up, confused. "Ma'am, this is the command channel. I have standing orders. Give it to me." Now she didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her eyes held his, and in that moment, he saw something that made him comply without another word. He handed her the headset. Anya put it on, adjusting the boom mic. She ignored Caldwell, who had stopped shouting and was now staring at her, his mouth agape. Her fingers flew over the console, switching frequencies, isolating channels, her movements economical and sure. "All stations, this is actual. Cease all chatter. Senior Chief Vance, report status." Over her voice was a blade, cutting through the static and the panic. Actual was a generic call sign for command authority, but she delivered it with such conviction that no one questioned it. Out on the water, Vance, wrestling with the controls of his own boat as it was battered by waves, heard the new voice. It was calm. It was clear. It was in control. "Actual, this is Vance. We have one boat capsized, that's RHIB-3. At least 3 men in the water. RHIB-4 is dead in the water, engine failure. RHIB-5 is reporting a hull breach. The rest of us are scattered and trying to recover personnel. Sea state is bad. Visibility is near zero. Over." "Copy that, Vance," Anya said, her eyes scanning the main tactical plot. Her brain was processing dozens of inputs at once. "Your mission is now search and rescue.
Ignore formation.
All boats, begin expanding box search from RHIB-3's last known position. Use thermal imagers. I want a personnel count every 2 minutes. Command vessel, what is your status?" The captain of the larger command boat, a seasoned chief warrant officer, responded instantly, recognizing competent leadership when he heard it. "Actual, we are holding steady, but maneuvering is difficult. We have eyes on the debris field from RHIB-3. Good. Hold your position. You are now the on-scene command node. Relay my instructions as needed." Caldwell finally found his voice. "Who the hell do you think you are? You can't do this. I am in command here." He started toward her. Senior Chief Vance, who had been standing by the door, took a single, deliberate step, blocking Caldwell's path. He didn't touch him. He just stood there, a granite wall of quiet disapproval. "Let her work, sir," he said, his voice a low growl. Anya didn't even look at them. She was in her element. The chaos was simply a complex problem with multiple variables. She turned to a terrified-looking ensign staring at a blank screen. "You," she said, pointing, "get me a direct link to fleet weather at North Island. I need real-time Doppler radar and sea state modeling for this grid square." Now the ensign, galvanized by the clear instruction, scrambled to comply. She pointed to another technician. "Patch me through to the Coast Guard Air Station in San Diego. Use the emergency SAR frequency. Authorize the launch of a Jayhawk helicopter. Give them these coordinates." She rattled off a precise latitude and longitude that she had already calculated in her head. "Tell them to look for multiple strobes and heat signatures in the water. Tell them we have candidates with biometric monitors. We can feed them the data stream to their cockpit display. Can you do that? I think so, ma'am. Don't think. Do it. Her commands were a cascade of logic and precision. She was moving assets around on a chessboard of dark water and howling wind. She knew every piece of equipment, its capabilities, its limitations. She knew the call signs, the frequencies, the protocols. She was pulling on a lifetime of knowledge that no one in that room knew she possessed. Vance, she said into the mic. What was the engine failure on RHI before? Port engine, actual. Just cut out. No warning. Anya's eyes flicked to the maintenance log she had memorized. RHIB4, the one she had flagged. The one with the anomalous RPMs. Copy that. It's a fuel line issue. Switch to the secondary fuel tank. The pump from that line should be clean. It will get you 5 minutes of power. Use it to get clear of the surf line. There was a pause on the other end. Then Vance's voice, filled with awe. Roger that, actual. Trying now a moment later. The roar of an engine burst through the speaker. It worked. We have power. Good. Now get your people out of the water. The TOC was transforming. The panic was subsiding, replaced by a focused, purposeful energy. The instructors and technicians were now moving with brisk efficiency, relaying Anya's orders, updating maps, and coordinating information. They had found their center of gravity, and it was the unassuming woman in the contractor polo. Caldwell stood by the wall, utterly defeated. He watched as the woman he had dismissed as a clerk single-handedly orchestrated a complex, multi-agency rescue operation. He had lost control of the situation, of his men, of his own career. He was a spectator at his own disaster. Frustrated and desperate to reassert some form of authority, he turned to the young ensign who had first been tasked with getting him a readiness report. Ensign, I want to know who that woman is. Right now. Pull up her service record. I want to see everything. The ensign, grateful for a direct order in the midst of the chaos he didn't understand, nodded and turned to a secondary terminal. He typed in Anya Sharma's name, using the contractor database to find her service number. He clicked search. For a few moments, the screen buffered. Then the file loaded. The ensign's eyes went wide. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. He reread the first few lines, then scrolled down, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief to profound respect. Sir, he whispered, his voice cracking. You need to see this. Caldwell strode over, impatience radiating from him. He looked at the screen, and the world fell out from under him. The information glowed in stark, official text against the blue background of the personnel file.
Sharma, Anya, OSN, RAR.
Rank, Master Chief Petty Officer, E9. Rating, Master at ARMS, MA. Clearance, TS/Psi. That alone was enough to stun him. A retired Master Chief, the highest enlisted rank possible, was working as a mid-level logistics contractor. But it was the section below that took his breath away. Significant awards and decorations. Silver Star. Bronze Star Medal with V for Valor, 3rd award. Purple Heart, 2nd award. Meritorious Service Medal. Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with V for Valor.
Combat Action Ribbon.
Below that was a long, heavily redacted list of deployments and special assignments. But one-line item stood out, unredacted and clear as a bell. Last duty assignment. Lead Instructor, Naval Special Warfare Group 1, Small Boat Operations and Tactics, Advanced. Caldwell felt the blood drain from his face. The woman he had accused of spreadsheet paranoia concerning a boat engine had literally written the book on how SEALs use those boats in combat. She had trained the men who had trained Vance. She had forgotten more about small boat operations than he would ever know. The Silver Star, the 3rd highest award for valor in combat, was a testament to a level of courage he could barely comprehend. The ensign, seeing his commander's shock, quietly stepped away, but the damage was done. The information spread through the room not in a shout, but in a series of hushed whispers and widening eyes. The instructors, one by one, glanced at the screen and then looked at Anya with a completely new understanding. Their posture straightened, their focus sharpened. They weren't just following the orders of a competent civilian anymore. They were following the orders of a legend. Anya herself remained oblivious to the revelation rippling through the room. Her entire world was the headset, the tactical plot, and the lives of the men scattered across the dark ocean. Jayhawk 1, this is actual, she said, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. I have you on radar 5 miles out. I'm transmitting the biometric data now. You're looking for 7 individuals in the water. 1 is showing signs of advanced hypothermia. He is your priority. I am vectoring RHIB-2 to your location to assist with recovery. Acknowledge. Actual, this is Jayhawk 1, solid copy. The pilot's voice crackled back. We have the data feed. Beginning our search pattern. We'll find your boys. For the next hour, Anya was the calm, unblinking eye of the hurricane. She coordinated the efforts of the Navy boats, the Coast Guard helicopter, and the shore-based medical teams with the fluid grace of a master conductor. She anticipated needs before they arose, rerouting assets, managing fuel states, and keeping a precise, real-time count of every single person. She knew their names, their conditions, their locations. She spoke to the boat crews with a familiarity and authority that resonated with them, using terminology and shorthand that only a seasoned operator would know. The instructors in the TOC had formed a silent, protective circle around her station. They anticipated her needs, bringing her water, updating secondary maps, and running interference so no one could distract her. They moved with a quiet reverence, their respect for her so palpable it was almost a physical force in the room. They were the 30 dangerous SEALs from the prompt's idea, but their defense of her was not a physical act of intimidation. It was a professional closing of ranks around one of their own, a silent, unanimous declaration that she was in command. Finally, Vance's voice came over the channel, weary but triumphant. Actual, this is Vance. We have a final head count. All personnel are recovered. I repeat, all personnel are accounted for. A wave of relief washed through the TOC. Men clapped each other on the back. A few let out shaky whoops of joy. Anya's shoulders, which had been ramrod straight for hours, slumped just a fraction. She took a slow, deep breath. Copy that, Vance. Good work. Bring them home. She methodically began the process of standing down the rescue operation, releasing the Coast Guard asset, coordinating medical transport for the half-dozen candidates suffering from hypothermia, and logging the status of the damaged boats. Her work was not done until every report was filed, every asset accounted for. As dawn began to bleed purple and gray across the horizon, the TOC slowly emptied out. The rescued candidates were being treated at the base clinic. The instructors had gone to debrief their boat crews. The crisis was over. Anya was one of the last to leave. She took off the headset, wiped it down with a sanitizing cloth from her rucksack, and coiled the cable with practiced precision. She stood there for a moment in the quiet room, the screens now displaying calm, orderly maps and status reports. LCDR Caldwell approached her, his steps hesitant. He looked haggard, his uniform rumpled, his face a mask of shame and exhaustion. He stood before her, not as a superior officer, but as a chastened subordinate. Master Chief, he began, his voice raspy. He couldn't bring himself to use her last name. I don't know what to say. Anya looked at him, her gray eyes holding no malice, no triumph, only a deep, abiding weariness. There's nothing to say, Lieutenant Commander. Just be better. Your people deserve it. She turned to leave. Wait, he said, his voice desperate. Why? Why are you here doing this? A logistics job? With your record. Anya paused at the door. She thought for a moment, her gaze distant. After my last tour, I was done with the noise, she said, her voice quiet. The shouting, the politics, the fighting. I just wanted to do a quiet, useful job. Make sure the equipment works. Make sure the numbers add up. It's clean. It's logical. The machines tell you the truth if you listen. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. People aren't always so honest, especially with themselves. She walked out of the TOC and into the cool, damp air of the new morning. The base was quiet now, the only sounds the distant cry of gulls and the gentle lapping of water against the pier. She didn't go to the locker room. Instead, she walked to her small, windowless office. The room was just as she had left it, the monitor displaying the complex web of data she had built. She sat down, the old chair groaning a familiar welcome. She opened a new file, After Action Report, Hell Week Evolution 3B. Her fingers began to move across the keyboard, her touch light and sure. She documented everything with cold, objective precision. The weather change, the equipment failures, the communication breakdown, the response times. She didn't mention Caldwell's panic or her own role in the rescue. She just reported the facts, the data. The report was not an indictment. It was a lesson. An hour later, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Senior Chief Vance appeared in her doorway, holding 2 fresh mugs of coffee. He didn't say anything about the night before. He didn't have to. The respect in his eyes was more eloquent than any words. He set 1 mug on the corner of her desk, right next to the neat stack of requisitions. "Heard from the clinic," Vance said quietly. "All the boys are going to be fine. A few are being held for observation, but they'll all recover." "Good," Anya said, her eyes still on the screen. "The preliminary inquiry is already starting," Vance continued. "Caldwell is being reassigned. Pending a full investigation, of course. But he's done here." Anya just nodded, continuing to type. Vance watched her for a moment, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. "You know, Master Chief, the instructor billets are always open. We could use someone who knows which end of a boat is which." Anya stopped typing. She looked down at her hands, then at the mug of coffee. A very faint, very rare smile touched the corners of her mouth. "Just Anya now, Senior Chief," she said softly. "And I'm happy right where I am. Someone has to make sure you guys have paperclips." Vance chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. He knew it was more than that. He knew that in this small, quiet office, the real guardian of the program was at work. He gave her a slow, respectful nod. "Whatever you say, Anya. Whatever you say." He left her to her work. Anya took a sip of the hot coffee. She finished the last line of her report, saved the file, and sent it to the base commander. Then she opened the maintenance logs for the ribs. There was work to be done. The numbers were waiting, and they always told the truth. Outside her door, the life of the base went on, but something fundamental had shifted. The quiet woman in the logistics office was no longer invisible. Her competence, once a silent, unseen force, now had a name and a history. And for the arrogant, the dismissive, and the young men who thought they understood the nature of strength, the lesson had been delivered not by a shout, but by a quiet, steady voice in the middle of a storm. Anya Sharma took another sip of coffee and got back to work. The quiet hum of her computer was the only sound.